Welcome to Glamorous Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell for more. Sit tight and let's dive in. The shrill vibration of Ethan's phone sliced through the stillness of the night like a blade. He jolted awake, heart thudding, his mind hazy from sleep. The glow of the screen burned in the dark room. Lila. For a split second, he hesitated, staring at her name, the forbidden contact he'd renamed as Logistics Office. But something in his gut twisted. She wouldn't call at this hour unless something was wrong. He swiped to answer. Lila? He whispered, his voice tight. Ethan? Her voice cracked, a sharp intake of breath interrupting her words. It's happening. The baby, it's too soon. Adrenaline surged through his veins, snapping the fog of sleep away. What? How far apart are the contractions? They're close, she gasped. The doctor said. Another breath hitched, followed by a whimper. Ethan, please. I'm scared. He was already out of bed, grabbing his jeans from the floor. Where are you? County General. The ER entrance. Hurry. I'm coming. The call ended, but her panicked breathing echoed in his ears. Ethan's heart raced, his mind spinning. His wife, Ava, was asleep in the next room. Dr. Ava Bennett, chief obstetrician, respected, admired. She had no idea that the woman about to deliver a baby tonight was carrying her husband's child. He moved like a ghost through the dim house, careful not to wake her. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a confession. He paused outside the bedroom door, looking in. Ava slept soundly, one arm draped across the empty space beside her. Guilt hit him like a fist. He almost turned back. Almost. But then he remembered Lila's voice. The panic, the fear, and guilt gave way to something else. Responsibility. He grabbed his keys, his coat, and slipped out the door. The cold night air hit him like punishment. He climbed into his car, hands trembling as he started the engine. The dashboard clock glowed 12:43 a.m. He tore down the quiet suburban streets, the tires whispering over wet asphalt. The city felt hollow at that hour, streetlights stretching long shadows, intersections empty except for the occasional lonely cab. His thoughts raced as fast as the car. He hadn't meant for things to go this far. It started as a friendship, late-night talks, laughter that came too easily. Lila was younger, vibrant, a nurse in the same hospital where Ava worked. He told himself it was harmless. But one night, loneliness had turned into something irreversible. Then came the call that changed everything. I'm pregnant. Ethan gripped the wheel tighter. He'd promised himself he'd fix it before the baby came. Tell Ava the truth. Face the consequences. But every time he tried, the words died in his throat. How do you shatter the life you built with someone who trusts you completely? His phone buzzed again on the passenger seat. Another call from Lila. He answered on speaker. I'm 5 minutes away. I'm being moved up. They said there's some complication with my pressure. Ethan, what if something happens to the baby? Nothing's going to happen. You hear me? Just breathe. His voice was firm, though his hands shook. I'm almost there. The sound of her crying filled the car, raw and terrified. He wanted to tell her it would be okay. He wanted to believe it himself. The hospital came into view, a block of harsh white light against the black sky. He pulled into the emergency bay and parked crookedly, not caring. The moment he stepped inside, the sterile air of antiseptic hit him. A nurse behind the desk looked up. Can I help you? She asked. I'm here for Lila Moreno. She was just brought in. She's in labor. The nurse typed quickly, eyes on her monitor. She's being prepped for delivery. Room 4A. Dr. Bennett's handling it. Ethan blinked. Doctor who? Dr. Bennett, she repeated. She's our attending tonight. His stomach dropped. The air seemed to vanish. Ava Bennett? The nurse nodded, not noticing the color drain from his face. That's right. You can wait over there, sir. He didn't move. Couldn't. The world around him seemed to tilt. Ava. Of all nights, of all shifts, she was the one on call. The wife he betrayed was about to deliver his mistress's baby. He stumbled toward the waiting area, heart hammering. The chair's plastic edge bit into his palms as he sat. Every breath felt heavy, shallow. He stared at the door that led to the delivery rooms, the corridor glowing sterile and endless. In his mind, flashes of their life together replayed like ghosts. Their wedding under the oak tree, the way Ava laughed when she burned pancakes, the quiet nights she stayed up charting patient notes. How many times had she told him about the miracle of birth, about bringing new life into the world? He used to admire her strength. Now he was about to witness it through the lens of betrayal. Minutes passed, though each one stretched painfully. Nurses moved through the halls, wheels squeaking, voices low. Ethan's leg bounced uncontrollably. He tried to breathe, but every inhale felt like confession. He could picture her now, Ava in her scrubs, professional, composed, unaware of the patient's connection to her. Or maybe she knew. Maybe fate had finally decided to unmask him. The swinging doors to the delivery ward burst open. A gurney rolled past, nurses surrounding it. For a split second he saw Lila, pale, eyes wide, clutching her stomach. Her gaze found his, desperate, pleading. "Ethan," she mouthed before disappearing through the doors. He stood, taking a step forward, but a nurse blocked him. "Sir, you can't go in there. She's in good hands. Dr. Bennett's one of the best." He swallowed hard, forcing a nod. "Yeah," he said, voice hollow. "Yeah, I know." As the nurse walked away, Ethan sank back into the chair. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Somewhere beyond that wall, the two women whose lives he'd destroyed were bound by an unthinkable thread. One fighting for life, the other fighting for control. He buried his face in his hands. His phone buzzed again, text from Ava earlier that evening. "Hope your presentation goes well. Love you." He stared at the words until they blurred. Guilt pressed down like a weight. He wanted to run, to vanish, but something deeper rooted him there. Responsibility, fear, or maybe the faint hope that this night could still end without disaster. The automatic doors opened and closed as people moved in and out, but Ethan stayed frozen. He didn't notice the security guard giving him a wary glance, or the vending machine light flickering behind him. His world had shrunk to one corridor, one name echoing in his head, Ava. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, whispering to himself, "Please God, don't let her find out tonight." But somewhere deep down he knew she already had. Ethan sat in the hospital waiting area, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight as if praying for a miracle. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Every second stretched into a minute, every minute into an hour. His heart pounded in sync with that relentless rhythm. Behind those sterile double doors, his two worlds were colliding, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He'd built his double life carefully, with the precision of an architect and the guilt of a thief. For years, he'd been the devoted husband, the man who made coffee for Ava every morning, who kissed her forehead before work, who pretended to listen when she talked about difficult cases. But lately their home had felt more like a hospital ward than a marriage. Ava was always on call, always exhausted. They'd started to orbit each other instead of meeting in the middle. That's when Lila came along. She was young, full of energy, her laugh contagious and her eyes bright with admiration. She worked under Ava's supervision in the maternity ward, a nurse still finding her footing. Ethan met her during one of Ava's charity events, the kind he attended out of obligation. He remembered how Lila had teased him about his awkward tie and how easily he'd laughed. It was a dangerous kind of ease, the kind that sneaks up on you and makes you forget where home is. He hadn't planned the affair. It happened in increments. Coffee breaks turned into dinners, jokes turned into secrets, and then one night, secrets turned into something irreversible. That night replayed in his mind now as he sat in that waiting room, the memory slicing through him like broken glass. "Ethan, this isn't right," Lila had whispered back then, tangled in sheets, guilt written across her face. "I know," he'd said, his voice low, eyes tracing the outline of her shoulder. "I don't want to hurt her. I just don't know how to let this go." "Then you will," she'd said, almost pleading. "You'll go back to her. We'll forget this." But they hadn't. Because forgetting is easier said than done, especially when love, or something that felt like it, takes root in forbidden soil. Now months later that night had grown into a life. A child. A secret that could no longer stay hidden. He rubbed his face, exhaling shakily. He thought of Ava's smile, the way she told him she was finally ready to start trying for a baby. He nodded, heart twisting. Soon, he'd promised. After this next project at work settles. Lies built on lies until even he started to believe them. A nurse passed by, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. She offered him a sympathetic smile, assuming he was just another nervous father-to-be. If only she knew. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The hospital had always been Ava's world. He used to joke that she loved those white walls more than she loved him. She'd laugh and tell him, "Saving lives doesn't mean I don't want a life with you." But over time he'd started to feel like the second patient in her care, quiet, unnoticed, always waiting for attention that never came. That's what he told himself to justify the affair. That's how he dulled the guilt. "You were lonely, Ethan. You didn't mean to fall." But as he sat there, surrounded by the scent of disinfectant and the distant beeping of monitors, the weight of that excuse crumbled. He looked down at his wedding band, the metal glinting under the harsh fluorescent light. He twisted it once, twice, then stopped. He remembered the day Ava had slipped it on his finger, her hands trembling, her eyes bright with tears. "Forever," she'd said. And he'd meant it then. He truly meant it. "Mr. Bennett?" A nurse's voice snapped him from his thoughts. He stood quickly, heart leaping. "Yes." "She's stable," the nurse said, glancing at her clipboard. "Dr. Bennett is performing the delivery herself. Everything's under control." Ethan froze again. The words hit harder the second time. Dr. Bennett. His wife. His savior and executioner, all in one breath. He nodded weakly. "Thank you." The nurse smiled and walked away, leaving him in the quiet storm of his thoughts. He tried to imagine how it had happened. Did Ava know before she entered that room? Had someone told her? Or had she recognized him in the waiting area? Maybe she'd seen the patient's name, Lila Moreno, and realized it. She was sharp. She never missed a detail. And when it came to betrayal, he knew she'd piece it together instantly. He pictured her face behind the surgical mask, eyes cold, composed, doing her job with the precision of a woman holding herself together by sheer will. He knew her anger wasn't loud. Ava never screamed or threw things. Her fury was silent, surgical. It cut cleanly, left no visible wound, but you bled anyway. He thought back to their last dinner together. It had been quiet. She'd been talking about a new fellowship opportunity, her voice tired but proud. "They want me to mentor the residents next semester," she'd said, smiling faintly. "It's a big deal, Ethan." He'd smiled back, distracted, his phone buzzing in his pocket. Lila's message lighting up the screen, "Miss you tonight." Now, sitting in that cold hospital chair, he wondered if Ava had sensed it then, the distance, the secret. Maybe she had and she'd chosen not to ask. Maybe she'd been waiting for him to tell her himself. But he hadn't. Cowardice had kept his mouth shut, and now fate had ripped it open for him. He stood and paced, the sterile walls closing in. He couldn't sit still. Every time he blinked, he saw Ava's eyes, those steady, knowing eyes, and Lila's frightened face. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through old messages. Lila's name appeared over and over. "Can't wait to meet our baby. Do you think they'll have your smile? Promise you'll be there, Ethan." He'd promised. He'd promised her everything without realizing the cost. Outside, dawn hadn't yet broken, but a faint blue glow touched the horizon beyond the glass doors. The world was moving forward while his life was stuck in this purgatory of guilt and consequence. A cleaner passed by, pushing a cart. The faint hum of the buffer on the tiles filled the silence. Ethan sat again, burying his face in his hands. He wanted to believe that if he stayed quiet enough, still enough, maybe the universe would forget he existed. Maybe he'd wake up and this would all be a dream. But dreams don't come with the sound of his wife's name echoing down the hospital corridor. He straightened up, running a hand through his hair. "She'll do her job," he muttered under his breath. "She always does." He tried to cling to that, Ava's professionalism, her strength. But beneath it was a truth he couldn't escape. Once she walked out of that operating room, the woman he knew, the life they shared, would be gone. And maybe, just maybe, he deserved that. The automatic doors of the maternity wing hissed open, releasing a blast of antiseptic air and the hum of hurried voices. Ethan's shoes squeaked against the linoleum as he stumbled forward, pulse hammering in his ears. He was breathless, his chest tight, like the air itself had turned to glass. The receptionist gave him a fleeting look of sympathy before turning back to her computer. No one here knew that this wasn't just another man rushing to see his newborn. This was a man walking straight into judgment. The corridor ahead stretched long and white, lined with rooms glowing in fluorescent light. Through one of them Lila was somewhere in pain, and beyond another his wife, Ava, was working, steady, precise, unknowing, or maybe fully knowing now. His thoughts tangled into panic. He wanted to turn back, to disappear before fate could finish what it had started. But his feet kept moving, drawn by guilt, fear, and some twisted instinct to see it through. A nurse caught sight of him. "Sir, are you family?" He hesitated, the word choking him. "Yes," he said quietly. "The father." "Then wait here, please," she said, motioning toward a bench by the wall. "Dr. Bennett's handling the delivery. We'll update you as soon as possible." That name again. Bennett. His own name now heavy like a curse. He sank onto the bench, elbows resting on his knees. The clock on the wall read 1:27 a.m. The hospital was alive in a quiet, mechanical rhythm. Wheels rolling, monitors beeping, the occasional soft cry of a newborn somewhere down the hall. Life and death coexisted here in perfect, indifferent balance. He wondered if Ava had ever felt this weight, the realization that every cry, every breath, every birth carried stories like his. Messy, human, unforgivable. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles. He could hear faint shouts from behind the delivery room doors, Lila's voice among them. It twisted his gut. He imagined her face pale, eyes wide, clutching the sheets as pain racked her body. She'd always been so full of light, and now, because of him, that light was flickering in a sterile room under the care of the very woman he betrayed. A nurse hurried past, talking into her radio. Prep or two. Dr. Bennett wants an extra set of hands. His stomach dropped. Or two. That meant complications. He stood abruptly, voice cracking. What's happening? Is she okay? The nurse paused, caught between duty and empathy. Sir, please stay seated. Dr. Bennett has it under control. He nodded automatically, though his heart screamed. Ava's face flashed in his mind, the calm determination she wore before every surgery, the quiet confidence that came from years of holding lives in her hands. He used to find that strength beautiful. Now it terrified him. He paced. Every sound, every movement in the hallway felt magnified. The buzz of a fluorescent light. The soft squeak of a gurney. The faint cry of a newborn somewhere distant. It all blurred into a single pulse of dread. Then, without warning, the double doors to the delivery ward swung open. A nurse stepped out, followed by a doctor in blue scrubs and a surgical mask. Ethan's eyes locked on her immediately. Even with her hair tucked away, even behind the mask, he knew. Ava. His heart stopped. The air vanished from his lungs. She moved with that same unshakable composure he'd seen 1,000 times before, her gloved hands steady as she adjusted her mask. But her eyes, those piercing gray eyes, found him in an instant. For a fraction of a second, the world went silent. No footsteps, no machines, just the two of them locked in a gaze that said everything words never could. He saw it all there, recognition, fury, heartbreak, but wrapped in the icy control of a professional. Ava Bennett, the doctor, stood before him. Not Ava, his wife. Doctor, a nurse called behind her. We're ready. Ava broke the gaze first, her eyes hardening into steel. She turned without a word and disappeared back through the swinging doors. Ethan stood frozen, as if that single glance had pierced through every lie he'd ever told. He sat down slowly, his legs weak. He buried his face in his hands, exhaling a sound between a groan and a prayer. It was over. Whatever fragile balance he'd tried to maintain was gone. She knew. Maybe she'd known for weeks. Maybe this was fate's cruel symmetry, his sin exposed not by confession but by consequence. Time blurred. He stared at the doors she'd vanished through, every second a lifetime. His mind replayed the look in her eyes over and over, until it burned behind his lids. There had been no yelling, no chaos, just the quiet devastation of a woman who'd realized the man she loved had betrayed her in the deepest possible way. A young nurse walked by, holding a tray of instruments. Ethan forced his voice to steady. Is Lila okay? She's in good hands, the nurse said with a reassuring smile. Dr. Bennett is one of the best obstetricians we have. The words twisted like a knife. One of the best. Yes, he knew. He'd seen her spend nights hunched over medical journals, double-checking case files long after midnight, sacrificing sleep, rest, even laughter for her patients. She devoted her life to saving mothers and babies, and now she was saving his mistress and child. He stood and walked to the glass window at the end of the hall, his reflection pale, hollow-eyed. Outside, the parking lot was a patchwork of shadows under orange light. The car he'd sped here and sat crooked, headlights still faintly glowing. He almost laughed. Everything about him was crooked now. He thought of their last anniversary dinner. Ava had worn the navy dress he loved, her hair pinned back, her eyes soft in the candlelight. We should take a trip, she'd said, smiling. Just you and me. No hospitals. No phones. He'd smiled back, guilt already creeping beneath his ribs. That sounds perfect. But instead of booking flights, he'd been driving to another apartment, holding another woman, making promises he couldn't keep. The sound of hurried footsteps drew him back. A nurse burst through the double doors, calling for another doctor. Ethan's pulse spiked. He grabbed her arm. Please, just tell me, is she okay? She's losing blood, the nurse said quickly. But Dr. Bennett's handling it. She broke free and ran down the corridor. Losing blood. The words echoed heavy and sharp. Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead, eyes burning. He couldn't sit still anymore. He walked to the door, staring through the narrow glass panel. Inside he caught flashes, nurses moving, equipment clattering, and at the center, Ava's steady form. She was barking orders, her voice firm, commanding. Even through the glass he could hear her tone, sharp as steel. She was saving Lila. His wife was saving the woman carrying his child. He wanted to shout, to beg her forgiveness, to tell her he'd never meant for this to happen. But he knew nothing he said would matter now. Words were just noise, and she'd spent her career cutting through noise to reach truth. He stepped back, trembling, his mind spinning. The irony was unbearable. The woman he'd betrayed had just become the only person who could save what remained of his secret life. He sank into the bench again, numb. Somewhere beyond that door, two women's lives were entangled in a way that no man could ever untangle. And Ethan Bennett, husband, lover, coward, could only wait for whichever life, or death, came out first. The world outside the delivery room seemed to hold its breath. Ethan sat motionless in the corridor, hands clasped together, palms slick with sweat. Every sound, the squeak of rubber soles, the metallic click of instruments beyond the door, cut through him like small electric shocks. He couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the two words that echoed endlessly in his head. She knows. Behind those swinging doors, the sterile air buzzed with tension. Ava stood at the operating table, her mask pulled tight across her face, her gloved hands stained with the crimson of urgency. Her eyes, sharp, focused, calm, moved between the monitors and the patient before her. Lila lay there, trembling, clutching the sides of the bed, tears streaking her cheeks. The pain twisted her face, but not as sharply as the confusion she'd felt when Ava had entered the room and introduced herself with steady calm. "Good evening, I'm Dr. Bennett," Ava had said, voice clipped but professional. "I'll be delivering your baby tonight." Lila had gone pale. "B. Bennett?" she'd stammered. "Ava Bennett?" "Yes," Ava replied, her eyes not leaving the chart. "Let's focus on you and your baby for now." Lila's lips had parted in shock, but the next contraction ripped through her, forcing a cry that drowned out any response. Ava didn't flinch. Her movements were mechanical, efficient, the rhythm of someone who'd long mastered detachment. Yet behind her composed expression, something seethed, something heavy, molten, barely contained. Outside, Ethan paced. He couldn't shake the image of Ava's eyes when they'd met earlier. He'd seen anger before, her quiet fury when things at work went wrong, when bureaucracy threatened her patience. But this was different. This wasn't the wrath of a doctor. It was the silent judgment of a wife betrayed, standing in the middle of the battlefield that betrayal had created. The door swung open briefly, a nurse rushing out for more supplies. For a fleeting second Ethan glimpsed the room, the bright lights, the frantic movements, the sterile chaos. And at the center, Ava, steady, commanding, divine in her fury and focus. Then the door shut and the sound was gone, leaving him stranded in silence again. Inside, Ava's voice rang clear and calm. "We're almost there. Deep breaths, Lila. You're doing fine." Lila looked up at her, eyes wide with fear and shame. I didn't know it would be you," she gasped between contractions. "Please, Focus on the baby," Ava interrupted softly, but her tone was firm, final. "We'll talk later." Her hands moved quickly, expertly. She was saving a life, two in fact, but it felt more like penance than duty. Every motion, every word of reassurance was an act of control, a way to keep herself from collapsing under the truth that had just shattered her world. Her mind, though disciplined, couldn't stop replaying the pieces. The late nights when Ethan said he was working, the half-truths, the distracted kisses, the sudden hesitations when she mentioned starting a family. She'd felt the distance growing, sensed the absence long before tonight, but never like this. Now the missing puzzle pieces lay before her, breathing, crying, bleeding. A nurse leaned in. "Doctor," fetal heart rate dropping. Ava's gaze shot to the monitor. "Prep for vacuum assist," she ordered, voice calm, eyes sharp. "We need to move fast." She didn't have time to think about heartbreak. The room spun into motion. Her body knew what to do. She guided the team through every step, her tone crisp, every command exact. Within minutes, a sharp cry pierced the room, a newborn's first wail, fragile but alive. Ava exhaled slowly, lowering her hands. "Clamp and cut," she said, her voice steady. The nurse handed her the scissors and she performed the final act of delivery with the same precision she always had, professional, practiced, unshaken. The baby's cries grew louder, and the nurses worked swiftly to clean and wrap the child. Ava turned to Lila. "You did well," she said quietly. Tears streamed down Lila's face. "Ava, I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely. "I didn't mean for..." But Ava had already stepped back, peeling off her gloves. "Rest now," she said, her voice low, unreadable. "You and the baby are stable. She gave a curt nod to the nurse. Take over from here. When Ava pushed through the swinging doors, the light from the delivery room spilled into the hallway, stark and unforgiving. Ethan stood there pale and trembling. Their eyes met again, and for a long, unbearable moment neither spoke. Ava's mask hung loose now, her face damp with sweat, her expression unreadable. Ethan tried to form words, but his throat felt raw. Ava? Don't, she said sharply, voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't anger in her tone, it was something colder. Restraint. Not here. He took a step toward her, desperate. I didn't. Her gaze cut through him like a scalpel. Not here. The words froze him. She brushed past, her scent faintly familiar, the lavender soap she always used after surgery. It hit him harder than her silence. He turned, watching her walk down the corridor, her back straight, her pace unbroken. She stopped at the nurse's station, speaking quietly with a colleague. Even now, even after everything, she was in control, composed, commanding, professional. He could almost pretend nothing had happened, that they were still the couple who shared quiet breakfasts and weekend getaways. But he knew better. The woman standing before him now wasn't his wife anymore, not in the way she had been. He waited, unsure if he should follow. His chest ached with a heaviness he couldn't shake. He wanted her to yell, to cry, to do anything that showed she still felt something for him. But Ava had always been different. When the world broke her, she didn't scream, she rebuilt herself in silence. Finally she turned back to him. Her eyes were steady, though rimmed with exhaustion. She's fine, she said softly. The baby too. He nodded, swallowing hard. Ava, You'll want to see them, she interrupted, her voice controlled but flat. Room 214. I've informed the staff. He opened his mouth again, but she raised a hand. Not now, Ethan. Please. There was the crack in her voice. Small but enough to gut him. She turned away before he could respond, her shoulders rigid, her steps mechanical. The woman who had just delivered another woman's child walked down the hallway with the composure of someone holding her world together with trembling hands. Ethan stood there long after she disappeared around the corner, his reflection ghostly in the glass of the door. Inside he could hear the soft cries of the newborn. Outside, the weight of Ava's silence pressed down harder than any accusation. And for the first time Ethan understood what real pain felt like, not the sharp sting of guilt, but the cold, endless ache of watching love die quietly, with dignity. The hospital corridor felt longer now, quieter, colder. Ethan sat in the same chair he'd been glued to for hours, but everything had changed. The weight in his chest wasn't panic anymore, it was the hollow stillness that follows disaster. He stared at the double doors Ava had disappeared through, waiting for her to come back, to look at him, to say something, anything, but the hallway remained empty. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic squeak of a janitor's mop across the tiles. He rubbed his palms together, the skin raw from friction. His phone buzzed once on the seat beside him. A notification, work email, something trivial. He swiped it away. His real life, the one with business calls and spreadsheets and quarterly meetings, felt like a costume he'd worn for too long. Tonight stripped all of it away. Tonight he wasn't a professional, a husband, or even a father. He was just a man caught between the wreckage of two lives. The doors opened again. For a brief moment he thought it was Ava, but it was a nurse. Sir, you can see them now. Room 214. Thank you, he said automatically, standing too quickly. His knees wobbled. He hesitated, glancing toward the hallway where Ava had gone, but she was nowhere in sight. He followed the nurse down the corridor, the walls narrowing around him like judgment. When he reached the door marked 214 he paused. Through the small glass window, he saw Lila, pale but smiling faintly, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. The baby, his baby, slept soundly wrapped in a soft pink blanket. The sight made his stomach turn and his chest ache at the same time. He opened the door quietly. Ethan, she whispered, weak but relieved. You made it. He managed a nod. Yeah, I'm here. He stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and something new, fragile, almost sacred, the scent of birth. Machines beeped softly in rhythm with Lila's breathing. She looked tired but peaceful, though guilt flickered behind her eyes when she looked at him. How are you feeling? He asked, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound calm. Exhausted, she said with a small laugh that quickly turned into tears. But she's perfect. Look at her, Ethan. Isn't she beautiful? He stepped closer, his gaze falling on the baby's tiny features. The wrinkled skin, the small fists curled tightly, the faint rise and fall of her chest. A lump rose in his throat. He'd never felt something so delicate, so undeserved in his life. She is, he said quietly. She's incredible. Lila looked at him, her smile faltering. Ava knows, doesn't she? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence that followed was heavy enough. Lila swallowed hard. She didn't say anything to me. Not one cruel word. Just calm. Professional. Like nothing was wrong. That's how she is, Ethan said softly. That's how she's always been. Even when everything is falling apart, she doesn't show it. She saves that for later. Lila blinked away tears. I wanted to tell her, Ethan. I wanted to be honest, but I was scared. I thought maybe you'd tell her before? I should've, he admitted, voice breaking. I should've told her months ago. I just kept thinking I could fix it before she found out. That I could control it somehow. He laughed bitterly. But she always ends up finding the truth on her own. Always. The door creaked open slightly. Ethan turned, his heart jumping, but it wasn't Ava. A nurse stepped in, checking the monitors. Dr. Bennett said to keep her under observation for a few hours, the nurse said without meeting his eyes. You're both lucky she was on call. Ethan's throat tightened. Lucky. That word had never sounded so wrong. When the nurse left, the room fell quiet again except for the faint hum of machines. Lila looked down at the baby, her voice trembling. She delivered my child, Ethan. Her hands brought her into the world. How am I supposed to live with that? He didn't know. There was no answer that could make sense of it. After a while, Lila drifted to sleep, exhaustion claiming her. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the city beyond the glass. The first light of dawn was creeping over the skyline, washing the world in pale gray. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass and let out a long, unsteady breath. He could still see Ava's face when she'd looked at him, how her eyes had held everything, pain, fury, heartbreak, and something even worse, indifference. When he turned around, she was standing in the doorway. He froze. Ava leaned against the frame, her surgical scrubs wrinkled, her hair tied back, dark strands clinging to her forehead. Her eyes were tired, beyond tired, but steady. She's stable, she said quietly. The baby too. I know, he said, voice cracking. The nurse told me. Ava nodded, stepping into the room. Her gaze flickered to Lila sleeping on the bed, then to the baby in the bassinet. For a brief moment, Ethan saw something pass over her expression, a mix of awe and sorrow, but it vanished as quickly as it came. You should probably go home, she said. Get some rest. He shook his head. Ava, please. We need to talk. Her jaw tightened. Not here. Then where? When? He stepped closer, desperation breaking through. You can't just pretend nothing happened. She looked up at him then, and her composure cracked slightly. Pretend? She said softly. You think that's what this is? Pretending? He had no words. She took a slow breath, folding her arms. I had to stand there, Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling now. I had to look at her, touch her, help her breathe. I had to deliver that child knowing it was yours. He tried to speak, but she shook her head, silencing him. Do you know what that felt like? To hold my composure while every nurse in that room looked at me, wondering if I'd break? I couldn't. Not there. Not in front of them. Her voice steadied again, sharp now. So I did my job. Because that's who I am. I don't fall apart in front of people. Tears burned at the back of his eyes. Ava, I'm sorry. I never wanted. No, she interrupted. You wanted both. Her and me. That's the truth, isn't it? He lowered his head, shame choking him. I thought I could end it. I thought I could. You thought wrong. Silence stretched between them. Then, softly, she said, when you walk out of this hospital, Ethan, don't come home right away. I need time. He looked up. Please don't do this. Don't just shut me out. Her lips trembled, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not shutting you out. I'm saving what little strength I have left. She turned to leave, her footsteps slow, measured. But before she reached the door, she stopped. The baby's healthy, she said without looking back. Congratulations. Then she walked away. Ethan stood there, his reflection staring back at him in the window glass. Behind him, the baby stirred, soft cries filling the silence Ava had left behind. He closed his eyes, feeling the full weight of the truth settle on his chest. Ava hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged or cursed. She'd done something far worse. She'd remained calm. And that calmness, the cold silence of a woman who no longer needed to fight, was more terrifying than any rage he could have imagined. The first rays of dawn slipped through the blinds of the hospital room, painting pale stripes across the white sheets. Ethan hadn't slept. He'd spent the night sitting between two worlds, his wife's silence and his mistress's exhaustion, watching both unravel in slow motion. The city outside was waking up, cars moving, coffee brewing, life continuing, while his head frozen somewhere between guilt and grief. Lila stirred in the bed beside him. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she winced slightly as she adjusted her position. "You're still here?" she whispered. Her voice was soft, cracked from exhaustion. He nodded without looking at her. "I couldn't just leave." She smiled faintly, though her eyes carried something heavier. "I didn't think you would. You've never been the kind of man to walk away easily, even when you should." Her words hit him like a dull blow. He looked down at his hands, the skin still bearing faint marks from clenching too hard. "She told me to go," he murmured. "Ava. She said she needed time." Lila's expression shifted. "Ethan," she started, then hesitated. "What happens now?" He sighed, rubbing his face. "I don't know. Everything I've done, everything I thought I could control, it's all just broken. I ruined everything." Lila's eyes drifted to the bassinet near the bed. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos surrounding her. "She's innocent in all this," she whispered. "None of this is her fault." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "And that's what terrifies me. I don't even know how to be a father to her when I can barely look at myself right now." Lila reached out, resting her hand gently on his. "You can still be one," she said softly. "You made a mistake. A terrible one. But you don't have to make another by disappearing." He met her eyes, and for a moment, the weight of her forgiveness was almost unbearable. "You don't hate me?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "I hate what we did. I hate that she had to find out like this. But hate you? No." She looked down, her voice faltering. "If I hated you, I'd have told her long ago." The words lingered between them, heavy but honest. Ethan stood and walked to the window, staring at the faint shimmer of morning light over the city skyline. "She'll never look at me the same way again," he said. "And maybe she shouldn't." "She might," Lila murmured. "Maybe not now. Maybe not for a long time. But Ava doesn't strike me as someone who lets anger make her small. She's stronger than that." He turned to her, surprised. "You've only seen her for a few hours." "I've seen enough," she said simply. The way she handled everything, she didn't flinch. She didn't lash out. She just did her job. That's strength, Ethan. That's grace. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "You're right. That's who she is. That's who she's always been." He paused, voice trembling. "And I broke her anyway." For a while, silence filled the room. The baby shifted softly in her sleep, making small noises that felt too pure for the weight hanging over them. Ethan watched her tiny hands move, her chest rise and fall. Something inside him cracked. The raw understanding of what had been created in sin but born in innocence. "I need to talk to her," he said suddenly. "Ava. I can't just let her carry this alone." Lila shook her head gently. "Give her space. She needs time to breathe, Ethan. To be herself again before she decides if she still wants to be with you." "I can't just wait," he said, voice low. "Every hour that passes feels like she's slipping further away." "Maybe she is," Lila whispered. "But chasing her right now will only push her faster." He turned away, gripping the edge of the window ledge, eyes stinging. "I thought I knew what love was," he said. "I thought it was passion or excitement or being wanted. But Ava, she's showing me what it really is. It's quiet, steady. And I destroyed it for something that was just noise." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Don't talk like that," she said softly. "We both made choices. Don't put all the blame on yourself." But he shook his head. "No. You didn't make vows to her." "I did." A nurse entered quietly, checking the monitors. "Vitals are good," she said with a professional smile. "You're recovering well, Ms. Moreno?" Dr. Bennett requested a follow-up later today. Lila froze. "She's coming back here?" The nurse nodded. "She insisted on checking both mother and child personally before her shift ends." Then she left as quietly as she'd come. Ethan's pulse spiked. He wasn't ready. He didn't know what he would say, or if she would even let him speak. He felt Lila's hand on his arm. "Go," she whispered. "If she's coming here, you shouldn't be. Not right now." He wanted to argue, but she was right. "I'll be back later," he said, glancing at the baby. You'll be okay?" Lila nodded. "We'll be fine. Just fix what you can if you can." Ethan left the room quietly, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. The hospital was brighter now, alive with movement. Nurses chatted softly, visitors carried coffee cups. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm. But inside him, nothing felt ordinary anymore. As he rounded the corner, he saw Ava down the hall, speaking to another doctor. She was still in scrubs, her hair pulled back neatly, her voice calm. To anyone else, she looked composed, untouchable. To Ethan, she looked unreachable. He stopped, half hidden behind a corner, watching her. She laughed lightly at something the other doctor said, a quiet, polite laugh that felt foreign to him. It wasn't the laugh she used to have, the one that started in her chest and reached her eyes. This one was mechanical, distant. When she turned and saw him, the laughter vanished instantly. Their eyes met across the hallway. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. She just studied him for a long, unbearable moment. Then she nodded once, professional, detached, and walked past without a word. He stood there as she passed, her perfume faint but familiar, her presence both comforting and devastating. For a moment he almost reached out to stop her. But the way she carried herself, the quiet strength, the walls she'd built overnight, told him she wasn't ready and maybe never would be. As she disappeared down the hall, Ethan leaned against the cold wall, closing his eyes. He could feel the sharp divide of his two lives. The one behind him, fragile and new, and the one ahead of him, broken and fading. Between them stood Ava, the woman who had been both his salvation and his reckoning. He whispered into the empty air, "I don't know how to live in either world anymore." And for the first time he realized he wasn't between two women. He was between two versions of himself, the man he'd pretended to be and the man he was finally forced to face. The hospital corridors had quieted, the morning rush giving way to the slow rhythm of routine. Ethan sat alone in the cafeteria, a cold cup of coffee untouched in front of him. The buzz of vending machines and the faint murmur of nurses filled the space, but to him, it was all distant noise. His mind kept circling back to the same point, Ava's voice, calm and composed, telling him to go home. Her composure haunted him more than any argument ever could. He hadn't left the building. He couldn't. He lingered in corners, pacing empty hallways, waiting for her to appear. Every time a door opened, his heart leapt. Every time it wasn't her, it sank. The clock on the wall said 9:15 a.m. He'd been here nearly 9 hours, running on caffeine and guilt. He rubbed his temples. She's probably home by now, he thought. Or maybe she's still avoiding home. The thought twisted in his chest. Their house, once warm, once filled with laughter and half-read books and her humming in the kitchen, was now just a memory wrapped in silence. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Bennett?" He looked up. It was one of the nurses from earlier, Maya, if he remembered correctly. Her eyes held that careful sympathy reserved for people whose lives had just collapsed. "Dr. Bennett asked me to let you know Lila and the baby are being moved to recovery. Both are doing well." He nodded, forcing a small, hollow smile. "Thank you." She hesitated before adding, "Dr. Bennett also left a note for you." He froze. "A note?" The nurse handed him a folded piece of paper. "She said you'd know when to read it." Then she walked away. Ethan stared at the note like it might burn him. Her handwriting was on the front, clean, precise, controlled. Ethan. He didn't open it right away. He waited, watching the reflection of the fluorescent lights flicker across the paper. When he finally unfolded it, the words hit him like a quiet confession. "You once told me the hardest thing in the world was watching someone you love suffer. You were right. But you never mention what it feels like when the person causing the suffering is the same one you love. I don't hate you. I don't think I can. But I can't live in a home built on lies either. I need space, away from this, from you, from the version of me that kept forgiving your absence. Take care of her. Take care of the child. But let me breathe before you ask me to look at you again. Ava." Ethan's hand shook as he folded the note back. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was worse, it was final. She wasn't leaving in fury, she was leaving in exhaustion. That kind of departure didn't come back easily. He pressed the note to his chest, his throat tightening. The walls seemed to close in. He remembered the nights she'd stayed up late after a long shift, sitting on the couch in her scrubs eating leftovers, asking him about his day even when she was half asleep. She had given him everything she had left, and he had still gone looking for more. He stood abruptly, pocketing the note. He couldn't stay in that sterile cafeteria any longer. The need to see her, to explain, to beg, to say something, was unbearable. He walked briskly toward the parking lot, ignoring the questioning looks from nurses and patients. Outside, the sun was rising higher, warm and indifferent. He climbed into his car and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The smell of her perfume still lingered faintly in the fabric from the last time she'd ridden beside him. They'd been laughing then, something about a song on the radio, something small, meaningless but real. That laugh felt like it belonged to another life. He started the engine and drove, the city blurring past him. Every red light felt like punishment, every turn a reminder of choices made too easily. When he reached their house, he parked in the driveway and just stared at it. The curtains were drawn. The porch light was still on. A mug sat forgotten on the front steps, hers from the morning before. He unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside. The smell of her still clung to the air, lavender, eucalyptus, a hint of hospital antiseptic. The living room was tidy as always. A blanket folded on the couch. A half-finished medical journal open on the coffee table. Her world organized, untouched. He sank onto the couch, the silence pressing down on him. His phone buzzed on the table. Lila, baby's doing fine. They'll discharge us tomorrow. He typed back mechanically, good. I'll come by later. Then he set the phone down and buried his face in his hands. He stayed like that for what felt like hours. The house felt too quiet without her. Even her silence at the hospital had been alive. It had filled the air with tension, meaning. Here it was just emptiness. When the door finally opened behind him, he almost didn't believe it. He turned slowly. Ava stood there, still in scrubs, her face pale and unreadable. She looked exhausted, but her eyes held that same steady clarity. She closed the door softly and leaned against it. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I didn't know where else to go. Her gaze softened just barely. You still think of this place as home? He hesitated. It's ours. She shook her head slowly. It was. He stood, taking a step toward her. Ava, please. Just let me explain. She held up a hand. No. Not explanations. I don't need them. He froze. Then what do you need? She met his eyes. Peace. Her voice cracked on the word, but she didn't look away. I've spent years fixing things, Ethan. Patience, systems, broken families. I thought love worked the same way, that if you care enough you can save anything. But I was wrong. Some things aren't meant to be repaired. Tears stung his eyes. I can't lose you like this. She took a breath, steady but trembling. You already did. Silence stretched. She walked past him, setting her hospital badge on the counter. I'm taking a few days off. Don't call me. Don't come after me. Please. He reached out, his voice breaking. Ava? She turned then, eyes glistening. You know what the cruelest part is? I still love you. Even now. And that's what hurts the most. She left before he could answer, the door closing softly behind her. Ethan stood in the center of their quiet home, surrounded by her absence. He looked down at the note still crumpled in his hand, the words echoing in his head. Take care of her. Take care of the child. He sat back on the couch, staring at nothing. Outside, the sun was high now, bright and indifferent to the ruin it illuminated. In one room, a child had just entered the world. In another, a marriage had quietly ended. And Ethan Bennett, once husband, now father, forever guilty, finally understood what it meant to witness both life and loss in the same breath. By morning, the story had spread through the hospital like a ripple in still water, quiet at first, whispered among nurses, then swelling into murmurs that carried from floor to floor. By noon everyone seemed to know. They didn't say it outright, of course. Hospitals were masters of discretion. But the glances, the silences, the knowing half-smiles said enough. Ethan Bennett, husband of Dr. Ava Bennett, had arrived in the middle of the night for his mistress in labor, and his wife had delivered the child. He felt the weight of it everywhere. Every step through the corridor drew looks that lingered too long. Every greeting came with a pause, a flicker of recognition. He walked faster, head down, hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets. He hadn't slept. His eyes were raw from tears, his mind caught in a loop he couldn't escape. Ava's voice, calm and final, telling him to let her breathe. The automatic doors opened, and the morning sun struck him full in the face. Outside, the world was bright and indifferent. Nurses chatting over coffee, a janitor spraying down the steps, the rhythmic wail of a distant ambulance. Life continued. The universe, it seemed, didn't care about the collapse of one man's world. He made his way to the maternity wing's side entrance, where the glass panels overlooked the nursery. Inside, rows of bassinets lined the room, tiny bundles wrapped in pastel blankets. He pressed a hand to the glass, scanning the rows until he found her. The smallest one, pink-capped, sleeping soundly under the tag that read Baby Moreno. His throat tightened. His daughter. The sight of her, so fragile, so new, hit him harder than he expected. She was a living contradiction, born out of betrayal yet innocent, untouched by the ruin around her. She stirred slightly, her tiny hand flexing in the air before settling again. Behind him, a voice spoke softly. "She looks healthy." He turned. It was Ava. She was out of her scrubs now, dressed simply in jeans and a dark sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked composed, but there was an unmistakable weariness in her eyes, the kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from loss too deep to measure. "Ava," he breathed, her name both a prayer and an apology. She stepped closer, her reflection joining his in the glass. "I came to check on her," she said quietly. "Lila's doing well. She'll be discharged this afternoon." He nodded. "You're still looking after them?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm their doctor, Ethan. My duty doesn't end because of what you did." The words stung, not because of their sharpness but because of how calm they were. Ava's anger wasn't loud, it was clean, controlled, and absolute. He wanted to tell her everything, to explain, to beg, but something about her stillness held him back. "I don't deserve your kindness," he said finally. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the baby. "No," she agreed softly. "You don't." The silence stretched. Through the glass, a nurse lifted the baby gently, checking her vitals. Ava's gaze followed every motion, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, she said, "She has your mouth." Ethan blinked, startled. "What?" "The baby," Ava murmured. "She looks like you." He turned back to the glass. For a moment he saw it too, the small curve of the lips, the faint crease near the chin. A part of him that felt long dead stirred, the ache of something pure beneath the wreckage. "I wish things were different," he whispered. Ava's reflection shifted slightly, her head bowing. "So do I." They stood in silence for a long time, the only sound the muffled cries of newborns behind the glass. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steady but distant. "Do you know what people are saying?" He nodded faintly. "Yeah. I heard. They're calling it poetic," she said with a bitter laugh. "The perfect irony. The devoted doctor delivering her husband's mistress's baby. It'll be a story for years." He winced. "Ava?" She turned to face him then, really looking at him for the first time that morning. Her eyes were red but resolute. "Do you know what I did when I got home?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "I sat in the shower for an hour," she said. "Not because I was sad. Not even angry. I just needed to feel something clean again." Her voice trembled just slightly. "Do you understand what that means?" He swallowed hard, shame burning through him. "I do," he whispered. "And I don't expect forgiveness. I just—" "You want me to believe you're sorry?" she finished for him. "And I do. But sorry doesn't undo anything. Sorry doesn't change that there's a baby in there with your blood, and a woman in recovery who will look at me for the rest of her life knowing what I know." Tears welled in his eyes. "I'll take responsibility. I'll do whatever I have to do for them. For you." She shook her head slowly. "You can't fix me, Ethan. You can't fix this. You can only choose who you want to be from now on." Her words landed with quiet finality. She turned back toward the glass, her eyes softening as she watched the baby again. "You know," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I spent my life bringing children into the world. Every time I thought it was a miracle. But last night it felt like punishment." He opened his mouth, but she lifted a hand. "Don't," she said softly. "There's nothing left to say." He stood beside her in silence, watching the nurse place the baby back in the bassinet. The tiny hand flexed again as if reaching for something unseen. After a moment Ava spoke again. "You should go," she said. "She'll wake up soon. Lila will need you there." He turned to her, desperate. "Ava, please. Don't just walk away." Her gaze met his, calm and unflinching. "Ethan," she said gently, "I walked away months ago. You just didn't notice." And with that she stepped past him, her footsteps soft but sure. He didn't follow. He couldn't. He turned back to the glass, staring at the small, sleeping child who carried both his shame and his legacy. Somewhere behind him, doors opened and closed. The sound faded into the hum of the hospital, a place where life began even as others ended. By the time he stepped outside, the world was already moving on. Reporters hadn't come, but the whispers would spread soon enough. A story too tragic, too cinematic not to tell. Husband rushed to hospital for pregnant mistress in labor. He was shocked to see who was the doctor. The headline would travel farther than any apology ever could. Ethan stood in the parking lot, the crisp air stinging his face. He looked up at the sky, bright and endless, and exhaled shakily. Somewhere inside that building, his daughter was taking her first breaths. Somewhere else, his marriage was exhaling its last. He thought of Ava, of the steadiness in her voice, the grace in her restraint, the heartbreak behind her eyes. And for the first time he didn't try to chase her or fix anything. He simply let it hurt. Because some stories don't end with forgiveness. Some end with understanding. And Ethan Bennett, standing between the birth of a child and the death of his marriage, finally understood everything. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story.